Let's take a look at how we're going to look at vocabulary. In this particular video, I want to talk about the acquisition of vocabulary. And I'm going to be doing it, first of all, by looking at the two-sided mode of how you learn vocabulary. Is it just a matter of learning words and what they mean? In other words, this is what teachers have been doing all along. Or is vocabulary part of fluency training or comprehension? Or both, or all three. You have to test this type of notion of how vocabulary is acquired by sort of a means of self-reflection. So here's a dictionary. How many words have you looked up in your lifetime? I would make a bet that you have looked up less than 5,000 words. Nevertheless, you have at your command somewhere between 500 and 800,000 words. Beyond that, if you were in the sciences or in engineering, perhaps you might have a relatively versatile ability to use as many as 1,000,000 different words. And then picture also if you were multilingual. For example, my wife, who can speak 3 different languages, clearly she knows millions of words. She can read in 3 different languages, and she can talk in 3 different languages. And she's able to acquire a language much more easily than I do. I find that I have to really study it. So reflect on your own dictionary usage. How much does a really earnest junior in high school who is knowing they're going to be studying for the SAT, they might actually have one of those companion books which might have the 500 most difficult words on the SAT, and they actually look these up and they start studying them. I think that really has a diminishing return about your ability. I mean, in other words, the diminishing return is that a student would be able to think that, yes, I know I've studied this word before. I know I studied it for the SAT, but I can't remember what it means. That would be the type of recognition that they would get out of that, and it's hardly going to be beneficial. Okay, then if you didn't look up all the words that you know, all 500,000 words that you know, well, how did you get it? Well, clearly there are naturalistic modes for learning, and vocabulary acquisition is one part of that naturalistic mode. So here are children on a field trip, and clearly they're getting information about this wetland by being able to move through it on this field trip in their class. And you saw the other field trips that I earmarked for you out of the George Lucas Educational Foundation. In particular, I'm thinking of the one about the teacher who was taking the children out to look at the horny toads out in the eastern Washington state area. Very dry area, no trees, but yet they had farmers and scientists who were helping them track horny toads. They were using pretty modern methods. They were using antenna systems connected to a pulsing radio frequency finder. They were using GPS, and they were hearing the scientists and our graduate students be able to talk knowledgeably to the children. They were using special vocabulary. Back in the classroom, they were using maps, and the farmers were helping them place data on these maps. So in the course of having these type of experiences, this is the natural mode for learning. Okay, in our reading, when we were looking at exactly how Bob I think was our character who was trying to figure out whether he should use, what should be his focus on vocabulary. And he very honestly admits that he tackles words knowing that these children are going to be tested on them, or a portion of them. They're going to be looking at these words in a standardized testing format. So what should he do? And my way of looking at that is, first of all, that if you're having to think that way, something's missing. And what's missing is being able to spend enough time working on any type of endeavor, any academic endeavor, and that means it's going to be 2 weeks or more. So you're thinking in terms of units. Without that type of long-term commitment, there's going to be problems. Now, we've also discussed how we're also going to use a multi-text, multi-level approach, being able to get students to do a great deal more reading, but there are also going to be events such as discussions, having experts arrive, being able to use primary sources, being able to work together to make presentations. All of these are student activities in which students have to use their vocabulary. All right, now let's talk about, we're going to be talking about in the next few minutes, situational context, and then I'm going to stop and begin a new movie. We're going to look at vocabulary instruction from research-based strategies. And we'll be looking at concept circles. We're going to be looking at concept to definition, word maps. We'll be looking at word walls. We'll look a little bit at word study. And we're going to look at group labels. List group label is a strategy devised by Hilda Taube. All right, so let's go on to situational context. Well, all of you know what a Harley Davidson, and you would be able to recognize it, or you'd certainly be able to know of it. That's a powerful motorcycle. However, if I am telling you a story and I mention that my retiree neighbor starts up his Harley Davidson lawnmower at 7 o'clock every Saturday morning to wake me up, I'm not admiring any Harley Davidson in that case. I'm speaking metaphorically about the type of noise and disruption that is being caused by my neighbor who's mowing the lawn. So being able to use words in new senses, ones that are going to create new meanings, is important. So therefore, the way in which language is being used orally is extremely important in a classroom. The value of discussions, the value of storytelling, the value of doing a read aloud, the value of doing a think aloud, all of these teacher elements carry a great deal of weight. Well, words don't always mean the same when there's a special context. So the special context that I'm describing is a situational context. And you have to kind of think of this notion of how you acquire meaning from words and listening to words, even conventional words, is that you had to have been there in order to understand it. So the example I'm going to give you is that I was in Walgreens and I was ready to pay for whatever I was buying, and a person came up to the clerk who was at the cash register, and the person in quite a bit of hurry said, "Do you have suntan lotion, or am I blind?" Well, if you think about it literally, that is really a complex phrasing. If you were Hispanic and just arriving in this country, you might think that they're talking about that this person is blind and cannot see. But instead it's a plea for help. So that is so subtly arrived at. It's subtle because you have to understand that the person is asking for help and cannot find the suntan lotion on the shelf. So there are special meanings and usage. And notice the suntan lotion and the issue of whether or not I'm blind, that these are stated in very conventional, mundane language. So the complexity of the thought, the subtlety of the thought shouldn't be overlooked. Using oral language in front of students gears them up for being able to use all language.